So I found out that if I give Nancy the title of the sermon right up front, that she can actually sit back and listen. So the title of this one is Power to the Pebble. So just to recap, during this season of Epiphany, the season where we get to know Jesus a little bit better, we have heard a voice from heaven. We've had a showstopper of a wedding with lots and lots of wine, a rather intense exchange in the synagogue, that's putting it lightly, and what could only be described last week as an unexpected blessing in the temple. And what's true is we've jumped around from time to time, too. We've had stories of when Jesus was a kid, but more often than not, we've had stories when he was much, much older. And so Epiphany, to me, is like when you're sitting with a group of friends, and you look at them and you say, remember the time, right? Remember the time when Jesus, the carpenter, said to Simon the fisherman, I bet I can outfish you. And for a boy who sure knew his way around the wood shop, after hearing this story, one would have thought that he started his life out on the water. And I guess he did. That is, if you think that 3 is 1, and that in the beginning, 1 and 3 hovered over the waters. Water is special to us. The prayer book says, through it, God led the the children of Israel out of their bondage in Egypt into the land of promise. In it, your son Jesus received the baptism of John and was anointed by the Holy Spirit as the Messiah, the Christ, to lead us through his death and resurrection from the bondage of sin into everlasting life. In it, we are buried with Christ in his death. By it, we share in his resurrection. Through it, we are reborn by the Holy Spirit, and therefore in joyful obedience to your Son. You know this. We approach the riverbank by love as we seek to immerse ourselves in the depths of faith. And along the way, we meet some very, very special people. The first time that Jesus met Simon, he looked at him and said, so, you're Simon, the son of John. We, of course, have Andrew to thank for that introduction. I mean, if you were Peter, could you really resist your older brother coming, well, probably rather running up to you, all out of breath, and saying, we have found the Messiah? I mean, I'd go with him just to see what he was talking about. I'd go just for the novelty of it all. But Peter learned quickly that Jesus wasn't just a curiosity, but the real deal. And so later on in the story, when all the others were mute, when Jesus looked at them and asked, who do people say that I am? It was Peter who said, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And to think that all of that started with a fishing trip. You know, I'll bet you Peter was one of those guys who could think like a fish. He was one of those fishermen who could see the fish underneath the water when everybody else around him just saw blue. He knew how to read the current, how to cast his net, what to use for bait, how to strip set a hook. And probably, even though history has cast him as a rather impetuous man, impulsive even. I think he was quite patient. I mean, the guy fished all night long. Some anglers hang it up after a while and come back another day after the fish have been spooked, but not Peter. Maybe that's why Jesus called him the rock. What we do know about Peter has already been said before. A rock isn't the prettiest thing, or the fanciest, or the smartest. And if it gets rolling in the wrong direction, watch out. But there's no nonsense about a rock. And once it settles down, it's pretty much there to stay. There's not a lot you can do to change a rock, or crack it, or get under its skin. And barring earthquakes, you can depend on it about as much as you can depend upon anything. And so Jesus called Peter the rock. And it stuck with him the rest of his life. Peter the rock. He could stop fishing for fish. He'd been promoted. And from there on out, people were to be his business. And he could start fishing for them. I love that quote from old Beekner. But if that is all this story is for us, a miraculous catch, a promotion, a new vocation, then I think we miss what is at the heart of the story. I get it. Epiphany is all about revelation. Epiphany is the unveiling of things so that we can see behind the curtain, so to speak. And so a carpenter showing up a fisherman who is at home in his own waters. I think if that's the story, then we've paid too much attention to the flash instead of the bang. And the bang is the underlying message of what occurs when one encounters the divine and questions themselves in the process. And even more so, in learning what the divine has to say back to us at such a critical moment. The gospel says, when they had done this, right, when they had listened to Jesus, did what he said, when they were casting their nets, they caught so many fish that their nets were beginning to break. So much so that they had to signal their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and they filled both boats, so much so that the boats began to sink, yes? And when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Get away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." Notice that Jesus doesn't say, "Didn't think you knew what I was talking about, did you, Peter?" Or worse, he doesn't look at Peter and say, "Yeah, you kind of are terrible. Just calling him as I see him." No, he said to this man that was on his knees and was probably averting his gaze so hard that when he said those words, his eyes were shut. Like he wasn't even looking at Jesus, right? He said to this man, "Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid, Peter." Do not be afraid. I've always wondered about why Jesus said that. Was Jesus trying to say, Sorry, man, I went a little overboard there. All the fish. Was he saying, do not be afraid because he saw Peter trembling? Or was Jesus responding to Peter, who was saying in such a way, Lord, I'm not worthy. I'm a sinful man. If he was, I think he would have said something else, but he didn't. And so it begs the question, what does one say when they encounter grace? I guess don't be afraid is as good as anything. I mean, which is easier to say in that moment? I love you, Peter. I love you even though in the future you will forsake me in my time of need. I love you despite all of that. For really, it is for you that I have come. It is for you that I came to die, to save you. Or would you say, I now call on you. Will you come and follow me? But so that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to call those whom he chooses. From now on, Peter, you will be catching people instead of fish. Not long thereafter, the brothers Zebedee left their father. They left everything. They left their partners who were still pulling fish out of the nets to follow Jesus and Peter. The sons of thunder, right? With Peter the rock, following Jesus, becoming his inner circle, and nothing would ever be the same again. Here is the world, Jesus would say to them again and again. Here is the world. Beautiful and terrible things will happen. But do not be afraid.